The moonlight pierced through the foliage, casting an eerie glow upon the forest floor. I gripped the silver dagger tightly, my knuckles turning white as I crept through the underbrush. The sounds of my best friend's inhuman snarls echoed in the distance, sending shivers down my spine. I never imagined it would come to this, having to hunt down and kill the very person I trusted the most. But the transformation was undeniable. The beast that stood before me was no longer the man I knew. Its savage yellow eyes, bared fangs, and clawed hands were a clear sign that my friend had become a werewolf. As I drew closer, I could see the creature hunched over, tearing into the remains of its latest victim. The sight was horrific, the blood-curdling screams still ringing in my ears. I knew I had to act quickly before more innocent lives were lost. Gritting my teeth, I lunged forward, the silver blade gleaming as I swung it towards the werewolf's exposed flank. The creature howled in pain, whirling around to face me, its jaws snapping viciously. We grappled, our bodies colliding in a frenzy of claws and fangs. I could feel the hot breath on my face, the saliva dripping down my cheek as the werewolf tried to overwhelm me. With a desperate surge of strength, I plunged the dagger deep into the beast's chest. The werewolf let out a bone-chilling scream, its limbs thrashing wildly before it collapsed to the ground unmoving. I stood there, panting heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. As the initial shock wore off, the reality of what I had done slowly sank in. I dropped to my knees beside the motionless body, my hands trembling as I reached out to gently turn my friend's face towards me. His features were still twisted in a horrific expression, the once familiar face now a mere shell of the person I had known. Tears stung my eyes as I took in the full weight of my actions. I had killed my best friend, the one person I trusted more than anyone, the person who had been there for me through thick and thin, who had shared my laughter and my pain, and now he lay dead at my feet because of the curse that had consumed him. The guilt was overwhelming, a crushing weight on my chest that threatened to suffocate me. I had no choice, I told myself. It was either him or countless innocent victims, but the knowledge did little to ease the anguish I felt. This was my friend, my brother, and I had been the one to take his life. I sat there in the eerie silence of the forest, cradling his lifeless form, my sobs echoing through the trees. The night air was thick with the stench of blood and death, a constant reminder of the horror I had just witnessed. I knew I would never be the same after this, that a part of me had died along with my friend. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, I knew I had to leave this place, to somehow find a way to move forward. But the weight of this tragedy would forever haunt me, a burden I would have to carry for the rest of my days. With a heavy heart, I gently closed my friend's eyes and turned to face the uncertain future that lay ahead. The journey back home was a blur, my feet carrying me through the winding forest paths as if on autopilot. The weight of my friend's lifeless body in my arms was a constant, gut-wrenching reminder of the horror I had witnessed. Each step was a struggle, both physically and emotionally, as I fought to keep my composure. As the familiar silhouette of my village came into view, I knew I would have to face the grim task of informing our friends and loved ones of what had happened. The thought filled me with dread, for I knew the pain and anguish my news would bring. But I owed it to my friend to ensure his memory was honored, even in the most tragic of circumstances. Mustering what little strength I had left, I pushed forward, trudging through the streets towards the town center. Whispers and concerned murmurs followed in my wake, the villagers sensing the somber mood that clung to me like a thick fog. When I finally reached the town square, I was greeted by a crowd of familiar faces, all of them looking to me expectantly. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I began to recount the events of the previous night, the transformation, the chase, the brutal confrontation. As the words spilled from my lips, I could see the horror and disbelief etching itself across their features, one by one. The wails of anguish that followed were gut-wrenching, a symphony of grief that tore at my heart. Mothers clutched their children, men hung their heads in sorrow, and the air was thick with a stench of despair. I stood there, a silent witness to their pain, knowing that I was the one who had plunged the dagger into the heart of our dear friend. In the days that followed, the village was shrouded in a veil of sorrow and disbelief. The news of our friend's tragic demise spread like wildfire, leaving a wake of devastation in its path. I found myself the unwilling center of attention as the villagers struggled to come to terms with the horrific truth. Many looked upon me with a mixture of pity and accusation, their eyes silently judging me for the deed I had been forced to commit. I bore the weight of their stares, my own guilt and anguish eating away at me with each passing moment. How could I ever find the strength to move on when I had robbed our community of such a beloved soul? As the funeral rites were carried out, I stood apart from the grieving throng, unable to bring myself to face the anguished expressions of our friends and family. I watched from afar as they wept and shared fond memories, their lamentations piercing the somber silence like the cries of wounded animals. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had before, my heart aching with an unbearable sorrow. In the lonely hours that followed, I would often find myself drawn to the very spot where I had struck the fatal blow. The memory of that night was seared into my mind, the sounds of our struggle and my friend's dying screams haunting me like an inescapable nightmare. I would kneel there in the dirt and the leaves, clutching the silver dagger that had taken his life, and weep until my body could produce no more tears. The villagers, in their grief, began to whisper rumors and theories, casting doubt upon my actions. Some claimed I had taken advantage of the situation, that I had harbored some dark resentment towards our friend. Others went so far as to suggest that I had willingly succumbed to the curse myself, and had orchestrated the entire tragedy for my own twisted purposes. The accusations stung, cutting deep into the core of my already shattered psyche. I wanted to scream, to defend my actions, to make them understand that I had no choice, that I had lost a part of myself that fateful night. But the words died on my lips, for how could I possibly justify the unspeakable act I had committed? The loss of my dear friend was a burden I would have to carry alone, without the comfort and understanding of my fellow villagers. In their eyes I had become a pariah, a dangerous outcast to be shunned and feared. As the days turned into weeks, the villagers slowly began to distance themselves from me, their once warm smiles and friendly greetings replaced by cold, indifferent stares. I found myself increasingly isolated, my once vibrant social life reduced to a lonely existence on the fringes of the community. The grief and loneliness threatened to consume me, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate the very life from my soul. It was in these darkest of moments that I would return to the forest, to the spot where my friend had drawn his last agonizing breaths. I would sit there for hours on end, lost in a haze of regret and self-loathing. The silver dagger, now stained with the blood of my best friend, remained a constant companion, a grim reminder of the horrors I had witnessed and the price I had been forced to pay.